Today's story revolves around the relationship between a brother and sister, focusing on a girl named Nova, who forms a bond with her stepbrother. The story begins with Nova packing her belongings, looking around her room and her home carefully as she's about to leave it. Nova's mood is gloomy because she doesn't want to leave her home, but her mother hastily remarried, and Nova isn't thrilled about the change. As they drive, Nova vents her frustration at her mom. Nova's mother is moving in with her new husband, who awaits them in a grand, luxurious home. While her mother is excited and warmly welcomed, Nova remains distant and avoids interacting with her stepfather, as she doesn't like him. She's given a guest room, which is beautiful, yet she doesn't appreciate it. Her friend calls, and Nova shares her discontent, explaining that even though she has everything here, she doesn't feel at ease with anything her stepfather provides. While talking, she heads to the kitchen to find something to eat. She's startled to see Nick, her stepfather's son, at the door. They introduce themselves, but things feel tense, especially when Nick's dog starts barking at her, making her nervous. She asks Nick to take the dog away, to which Nick remarks that she might be in the wrong place. Nova replies, explaining she's here out of obligation, not choice. Nick calms her down and steps close to her, making her uncomfortable yet intrigued. Just then, Nova's mom and stepdad enter and announce they're all going out for a family dinner. Nova's mom has bought her several dresses, but Nova finds them unappealing and wears a simple outfit. She reluctantly spends the evening with them, listening as Nick's dad praises him as a good guy with no bad habits or vices, making Nick seem like the perfect son. Later, as Nick is about to leave for something, so Nova asks Nick to drop her home. Nick didn't want to take Nova along, but at his dad's insistence, he takes her with him. They sit in the car and start heading home, but during the drive, they get into an argument. After some heated words, Nick asks Nova to get out of the car. When Nova refuses, Nick drops her off in a deserted area and drives away. Her phone is also off, so she waits there, hoping for a lift. After a while, she sees a car approaching and signals for a lift. The car is driven by a young guy. Initially, Nova is hesitant and feels scared, but after talking with him, she feels comfortable enough to get in. She explains that her brother left her stranded there. The boy asks her brother's name, and when she says Nick, he laughs, saying he knows Nick. He tells her that Nick left her because he was heading to a party, and adds that he's also going to the same party. Nova decides to go along with him to the party. When they arrive, Nova spots Nick at the party, indulging himself with multiple girls. The boy tells her more about the party, revealing it's actually a gang party. He points to a guy named Ronnie and warns her to stay away from him as he just got out of jail the previous day. Nova realizes that Nick lied to their parents about having important work, but is actually here partying. Angrily, she confronts Nick, slapping him and saying she'll tell their dad everything. Nick, now furious, tells her not to inform their dad and that she shouldn't be concerned with his actions. He then tells her to leave the party and go home, but she refuses, so Nick walks away. Nova makes a new friend, a girl at the party, while Nick goes back to his partying. Nova eventually joins a different group of guys and drinks a Coke with them, but then Nick returns and starts fighting the guy because the drink had drugs in it. Nova, upset with Nick, starts arguing, so he explains. Nova starts feeling dizzy after suspecting her drink was spiked, and Nick brings her to his house, letting her sleep in his room. The next morning, while Nick is having breakfast, Nova approaches him, asking what happened between them the previous night. Nick mischievously tells her that a lot happened, which leaves Nova anxious. Later, Nova goes to the beach with Nick's friends, and Nick follows her. While at the beach, Nick wades into the water, and Nova watches him intently. That evening, at a race, Nick can't take his eyes off Nova, as she's looking incredibly beautiful. The race begins, and in the end, Nick emerges victorious. During the after-party, Nova receives a message and sees that her boyfriend is kissing one of her friends. Furious, she decides to dance and takes a selfie kissing another guy, intending to send it to make her boyfriend jealous. Just then, Nick arrives, and the guy quickly leaves. Annoyed, Nova confronts Nick, saying, "Why do you keep driving away any guy I'm with?" Nick asks her why she's so angry, and when he glances at her phone, he understands the reason behind her behavior. They end up kissing and send a picture to her boyfriend. Afterward, Nick puts Nova in his car and goes off to find Nia to drop her off. Nova waits in the car for a while, but Nia hasn't shown up. Meanwhile, Nick starts getting close to another girl. A guy approaches Nova by her car and challenges her to a race. At first, she refuses, but after his repeated provocations, she agrees to race him. Nova and Nick's friend end up racing, and when Nick finds out, he rushes to the track, distressed to see Nova racing. Nova wins the race, but despite her victory, Nick still ends up having to hand over his car and some money. After this, Nova gets angry at the boy, and then Ronnie abuses Nova, which leads Nick to punch him. Following this, a fight breaks out between Nick and Ronnie. Nova, feeling scared, sits down nervously, and during the fight, someone accidentally steps on her hand, injuring it. After that, Nick and Nova escape in a car. In the car, Nick wraps his handkerchief around her injured hand. Nova feels regretful about taking Nick's car and apologizes to him. The next morning, Nova's mother comes to wake her up and tells her that her father has organized a party today. Later, we see Nick sitting with a little girl who is sick. Everyone believes that Nick will surely come to the party. The party ends, and Nova waits for him at home. Nick eventually arrives and sits down beside her. Nova then confesses that she has started to like him, and they share a kiss. The next day, when Nova is washing her car, Nick watches her, and Nova, noticing him, starts splashing water on herself playfully. At that moment, Nova's mom introduces her to her boyfriend, Den. However, Nova no longer has feelings for Den. When Den tries to kiss her, she turns her face away. Den plans to stay there for a few days, which is troubling for Nova because she no longer loves him. Nova angrily tells Den, "How dare you come here?" Den responds that he only came to apologize. Later, when Nick is swimming in the pool, Nova approaches him, and Nick pulls her into the pool where they share a romantic moment. Den sees them kissing, but Nick's friend explains that Den is just the boy next door. Den realizes the truth but assumes that he is Nova's brother. Nova later clears things up and tells Den that nothing can happen between them anymore, as she only loves Nick. She requests Den to keep this a secret, and since Den is a good guy, he leaves without telling anyone. However, a new problem arises for Nova when an unknown person starts sending her letters, threatening to reveal her secrets. In the next scene, Nova's biological father is shown talking to his friend about taking revenge on his wife. At night, Nick comes to Nova while she's sleeping. He touches her, and when she wakes up, she punches him, thinking someone is bothering her. Nick falls to the ground, and Nova, seeing it's him, apologizes, explaining that she thought someone was harassing her. Nova cleans his wound, and once again, they get close. Just then, Nova's boyfriend sees them together. Nova asks him not to mention this to anyone and to leave. The next morning, Nova gives her mom a letter from her boyfriend, who has left. Afterward, Nova and Nick go somewhere with their friends, and when they get a moment alone, Nick tells Nova he loves her deeply and kisses her. Just then, their friends arrive and catch them, leaving both of them embarrassed. Later, when Nick goes to a fight, Nova tries to stop him, but he doesn't listen, so she leaves. Outside, she meets Nick's friend, who has feelings for her, and is about to kiss her when Nick arrives, shoving him away. Nick tells Nova he loves her, and that she shouldn't get close to anyone else. Nova responds angrily, saying there's nothing between them, and walks away. Meanwhile, both Nova and Nick miss each other a lot. Later, Nick's father tells him that Nova's dad has been released from jail, and that he used to abuse Nova's mom and hurt Nova too. Nick's father asks him to take care of Nova and her mom, and Nick promises to protect them both. In the next scene, Nova is at a party when Nick calls her, but she doesn't answer his call. This prompts Nick to come to the party. Meanwhile, Nova's father is also at the party with the intention of abducting her. However, when he sees Nick, he decides to leave and gets back into his car. Upon seeing Nick, Nova leaves the party, and her friend locks her inside a closet as a prank, which frightens her. Nick finds her and helps her out, and they both leave for home. When they arrive, Nick goes to Nova's room and falls asleep there. The next morning, Nova's father catches them together. Later, Nick visits Nova's sister in the hospital and tells Nova that their families will never allow them to be together. To make their night memorable, they go to the beach and spend quality time there. On their way back, Nick gets out of the car to get something, but the boy who had previously fought with Nick kidnaps him. Nick informs his father about the incident, and his father seeks help from the police. The police review CCTV footage, and Nick identifies the boy. Meanwhile, Nova is also kidnapped by her father, who calls Nova's mother and demands a hefty ransom in exchange for Nova. Nick's father agrees to pay the money. The next day, they arrive at the designated location with the money, while undercover police officers keep a close watch. However, Nova's father has set up cameras at the location and listens to their conversations. The police discover a tracker placed in Nick's car, which they use to locate Nova. When Nova's father realizes they are being tracked, he decides to flee with Nova. Nova is driving the car at this point. When she stops the car, her father points a gun at her head and forces her to keep driving. Meanwhile, Nick and the others were chasing after them. As soon as Nick and Nova's car comes into view, Nova ducks down. At that moment, a lady officer fires her gun, and the bullet hits Nova's father. Nova runs towards Nick and embraces him. In the next scene, Nick sneaks into Nova's room and enters. After this, the two share a romantic moment. Meanwhile, Nick's mom and dad also accept their relationship. With this, the movie comes to an end. For more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. See you soon in the next video.